Hey everybody, Professor Moore here. So the reason why I put so much effort into researching and teaching the history of slavery and white supremacy is because that history is currently under attack by an organized conservative movement that is actively trying to make sure that Americans never know the real history of their country. For a long time, there has been an effort to whitewash and erase the history of slavery. And we can really see that if we look at American textbooks that have been used in middle schools and high schools. For decades, studies have shown that American textbooks routinely falsify, downplay, and distort the reality of slavery. For example, some textbooks were found to refer to enslaved people as workers or immigrants. And I think everybody can see why this is ridiculous and dangerous. Workers have agency. Workers can choose whether or not they go to work. Workers get paid for their labor. Immigrants have agency. They choose to go to another country. They are not kidnapped and then forced into enslavement. Some textbooks in Texas have been found to include extended discussions about how not all slaves were unhappy, about how some enslaved people actually enjoyed their enslavement. This racist trope of the happy slave can be seen in children's books like this, A Birthday Cake for George Washington, which features enslaved people on the cover who are smiling and happy and completely content with their life. And luckily, this book was pulled from the shelves. But can you imagine the damage this would do to a young child that's just learning how to read, and this is the image they're getting of slavery, the first image they're getting, this image of the happy slave? Anytime there's been a push to talk about slavery more in the classroom or teach a more accurate history of slavery, there is always pushback from Republicans. For example, in 2019, the New York Times released the 1619 Project, and one of the fundamental goals of that project was to get students in American classrooms to be talking about slavery more and to have a more accurate understanding of this history. And as soon as American teachers started bringing the 1619 Project into the classroom, Republican lawmakers across the country started issuing bills to ban the teaching of 1619. They even went as far as to try to deny funding to any schools that taught the 1619 Project. Now, even though there are some issues with some of the topics that are discussed in the essays and articles associated with the 1619 Project, I still fundamentally believe in the main mission of the project. We need to be talking about slavery more, especially to our students, and we need to be having a more accurate discussion about the reality of what slavery really was. And the reason we need to be having that conversation is because this history is always under attack. For example, after the 1619 Project got started in 2019, in 2020, President Trump started his own 1776 Commission. The 1776 Commission was designed as a complete overhaul of how American history is taught in public schools. And when Trump announced the 1776 Commission, he said that this was going to be patriotic, pro-America education. He said that the 1776 Commission will be a pro-American curriculum that will encourage educators to teach our children about the miracle of American history and show them that America is the most fair, equal, and prosperous nation in human history. The 1776 Commission was going to introduce students to slavery, but they were going to downplay it. It wasn't going to be part of the main narrative. They were also going to get rid of mentioning anything about the violence that was committed by European and American colonists against indigenous peoples. Even though when Biden won the presidency, one of the first things he did was issue an executive order to cancel the 1776 Commission, there are still states across the country that are trying to implement exactly what Trump was going for, a pro-America patriotic education that completely distorts, downplays, and erases the reality of slavery. In Tennessee, conservative lawmakers have gone after the history of slavery by attacking critical race theory, which is essentially just critically analyzing how race has shaped American history, not so much of a theory as much as a fact. In Texas and Oklahoma, Republican lawmakers have also issued bills and laws attacking the teaching of history and trying to downplay the reality and the brutality of this system. Florida has been at the forefront of this effort to distort and erase the real history of slavery. They've tried teaching that there were actually positive benefits to slavery. And they've also tried to get rid of any discussion of slavery that would make any white students in the classroom uncomfortable. But here's the thing, history shouldn't be comfortable. We should feel uncomfortable when confronted with this history of slavery and white supremacy. History should not be easy. History is hard. History is not about confirming what you think or making yourself feel better. History is about being open to learning and discovering new information and even challenging everything that you thought you knew. I agree with historian Hassan Kwame Jeffries, who said, "Slavery is hard history. It's hard to comprehend the inhumanity that defined it. It is hard to discuss the violence that sustained it. It is hard to teach the ideology of white supremacy that justified it. And it is hard to learn about those who abided it. We, the people, have a deep-seated aversion to hard history because we are uncomfortable with the implications it raises about the past as well as the present." Conservatives don't want us to know the true history of slavery because once you start engaging with this material, you can never look at American history the same ever again. And more importantly, once you start learning this real history, you start making connections between the past and the present, and we start seeing the way that white supremacy and slavery still shapes and impacts the world that we live in today. Conservatives are trying to erase the real history of slavery to create and control a new narrative, and we know what that narrative is. Slavery wasn't that bad. Not all enslaved people were unhappy. You know what? It wasn't even really slavery. Enslaved people were really workers. They were immigrants. That's the narrative that they want to promote, and it's a lie. That's why it is the responsibility of all history teachers and professors to research and learn the real history of slavery and white supremacy. It's hard history, but good history is never easy.